Our next speaker is a major leader of the fight for inclusion of queer themes and developers in the video game industry. He's CEO of Midboss and executive producer of the annual GamerX convention. Please welcome Matt Conn.
Howdy, y'all. I'm so honored to be here in Norway. Before I start my talk, I actually have a Jory story. Our game that we actually made a game called Read Only Memories, and we're doing a voice-acted version. And we had the honor of actually working with Jory, and it was actually the last project that Jory worked on. And it was very surreal because during that whole time that we were working, he was just telling me about, you know, he was planning this trip to Norway and how amazing it was, and just what a cool spot it is, and it's just really surreal to be here now today, and you know, Jory was an amazing person, and really, like, I don't know if I would be here today. I mean, I think a lot of people wouldn't be here today without you know, what Jory's done for the industry. Yeah. Well, let's get into this topic. So I wanted to talk to you guys about pragmatic and subversive versus full immersion. And what does that mean? This is a lot of words. Basically, I'm a big fan of subversion. I think that if you have themes or political messages that you want to get across, you can't just lecture people. You can't just be like, people in general, in a capitalist society, are not going to just take their medicine. If you say, oh, you know, we want to have more queer people in our games, you can't just, you know, lecture people and go. You kind of have to show them why that's cool. And so that's sort of my thought process when I make games. Is I want to do, not just with games, but also with our convention, GamerX, I want to make something that doesn't just preach to the choir, but can help kind of bring people in who might not understand why that's important, why it's important to have diversity in games or things like that. And I kind of try to use like the honey instead of vinegar approach. However, you know, through running GamerX, I've met a lot of different people who make a lot of different kinds of games. And for some people, they feel like the subversive and things like that are not the best way to go about it. Sometimes it's better to just, if you have a message, if you have a vision, you should just go all out, and to do anything less is to compromise. And so I think that they're both very valid thought processes, and I'm going to kind of talk about, you know, where finding that line is for you. Because at the end of the day, we live in a capitalist society, and you want to make games that are going to sell, and so you can make money and eat and have fun and keep doing what you're doing. But at the same time, if you have a vision or you have something that you really want to get across, is it better to try to work within the system and make the system work for you? Or is it better to kind of just let the world see your glory? And you know, and I think that the answer to this, you know, spoiler, is that there is no correct way. It depends on what you want and what's going to make you happy. But yeah, real quick, let's get into who I am. And if you want to tweet at me after the thing, or I'll be around all day, and I'm here until Monday if you ever want to chat or hang out. But you can also just tweet at me at Matt Conn, and I'm always down to chat if anything I talked about in here doesn't make sense or whatever. So yeah, my name is Matt. I was born in New York City, and I was raised in Vermont. And you know, I grew up being a super big geek. I didn't really have many friends, and so I played a lot of games like Earthbound and Mario RPG, and I mean, I played all the classics, but those were the games that really kind of like stuck with me. Those kind of like alt games of the 90s. And you know, as growing up as a gay geek, I always felt super isolated because you know, there really wasn't a gay community in Vermont. Was very kind of in the sticks in a way, and so there really wasn't a gay community, and there wasn't really a geek community. And the very small amounts of people that existed in those communities, there certainly wasn't a gay geek community. And so you kind of had to pick and choose what community you wanted to belong to, and you really had to like basically segregate your personality to be like, I'm going to be the geek around these people and the gay around these people. And no one can really see who I truly am. And I moved to the West Coast when I was 17, and basically I went to a really conservative Christian college, and I basically, you know, I think that I learned what actual discrimination looked like, and inspired me to kind of do this work. What the? Uh-oh. Okay. There's an extra slide there. Uh-oh. Well, the second slide was going to be about, so I moved to the West Coast, and I co-founded a company called Bandpage, which, you just have to pretend that it's here. I founded a company called Bandpage, and we were extremely successful. We started when I was 21, and I was the third or fourth person at this company, and within 6 to 7 months, we got 30 million monthly active users. We were beating out, you know, some of these biggest games on Facebook, and so within a year or so, we raised about $20 million. And that was very, you know, interesting for me in terms of, like, although I was very young and naive going into it, and I really, looking back at it, I actually signed a very, very bad deal in terms of what I got out of it. It was really fascinating to kind of see that at a very young age that there's literally nothing stopping any of you from going out and changing the world. Like, I always thought I was just gonna just be some person, and I watched it all kind of happen in front of my eyes. But the tech industry was not really where I wanted to be. I wasn't happy, although it was something that was definitely a career path. I didn't really find any communities, and so I was inspired by that I created a Kickstarter for an event called GamerX, and the response was huge. And you know, within a couple years, you know, we now have, you know, we're in our 5th year. We are launching a New York City event this year. We have our 2nd year of an Australian event, and our 5th year in San Francisco. We have about 2,500 people that come out, and it's not only it's the largest, but it's also the only LGBT kind of focused gaming event. And we have people for like Tim Kaine, who created the Fallout series, and David Gator, the lead writer of the Dragon Age series, to Nita Sarkeesian, to you know, the top like trans esports players, to just kind of like all these different people who are really at the top of their field in different areas of LGBT, but not just LGBT, but really, you know, women, people of color, disabled people, queer people. We're all kind of coming from the same perspective of trying to get to the table. So that's sort of what we do there. And so with launching GamerX, I realized that there was so much other need for, you know, providing spaces and products in the gaming world that really focus on LGBT issues. So we made a documentary called Gaming in Color, which kind of explains on a very 101 level why we do what we do. You know, obviously there's the gamergators and the alt-right that just hate us for being us, and that's like whatever. But I think there was a lot of people who were more in the mid-range who just were like, well, I just don't get why queer people can't just be a part of, you know, like oh, you know, we don't hate you. We're not gonna like just be a part of PAX. Like, just go to PAX. Why do you need to have your own thing? And you know, like, I think that was something where at least they were coming. They're wrong, but you know, they're coming at it from a perspective that is at least like they have good intentions, and so we kind of created this film about kind of explain why what we're doing is important. And we also made a game called Read Only Memories with the whole point, and that's sort of what this topic is going to be all about. The whole point of it was to create a game that could be a mainstream, popular game that hopefully would do well, and it's sold over 100,000 copies, that features queer characters and queer narratives at its core. But we knew that if we made a game that was like, here's the queer game, it would only sell to the queer audience. You know, how do we create a game that is going to sell to the mainstream audience while still encapsulating the values that we want to get across? And that was sort of what we thought. And so I'm a huge fan, like I said, going back to what I was talking about originally, I'm a huge fan of subversive art. A show that I really, really enjoy is a show called Empire. Well, it's 2 shows I really enjoy, Empire and Steven Universe. They're 2 shows that just completely subvert the idea of what the audiences, like, Empire was one of the fastest, like, no TV show had ever debuted or went up in ratings every single week for the premiere season. And Empire features an all-black cast, or, you know, 90% of the cast is black. One of the main characters is a gay black man, and it deals with, like, mental health issues, all these different intersectionality issues, and yet it was still super popular in America, you know. And I know people, like, I know a friend of mine is a gay black man who's mother, never accepted him as a gay person until this show was on the air, and she was like, oh, now she associates herself with Cookie, and she's like, oh, you're my little Jamal, and like, and which is funny, but like the thing is that because they saw themselves, like we all know that representation matters, but if people were to say like, oh, here's this TV show about like a gay black guy and a black guy with like this and that, whatever, it wouldn't necessarily play to the mainstream. So they kind of had to like disguise a lot of these topics that they wanted to bring out, disguised behind just like killer bomb music, like the music is all audio directed by Timbaland. You have amazing actors like Taraji P. Henson and the guy from Crash, and just it's just like it kind of hides the idea of what it is. Same with Steven Universe. It's a show that theoretically is just about some boy who looks like a white boy who's just he fights not crime, but he fights like these bizarre things that happen within Beach City. And it's like that for the first 10 to 15 episodes. And by like episodes 70 or 80, it's like, look at these lesbian space rocks who are like, it's all these different things that if they had pitched it that way, I don't think the show would have ever gotten off the ground. Because I think that in a way, you have to kind of trick the audience into thinking that it's one thing, especially if it's something that has never been done before or on paper might sound kind of silly. To relate it to games, if you have an idea in your mind, like say, I have a friend of mine who, he lives in Japan, he's a black man, and he's working on a game that's about what it's like to grow up as a poor black person in America. And it's like a VR game, and it's a very dark, not fun game. And the thing is that if you think about it, like how many, just try to think about it from a pragmatic business sense. How many kids and people, even the most liberal person is going to be like, I want to throw down $30 to be miserable. And the thing is, it's not many. There's a game that came out called Fragments of Him that was a game that featured a bunch of bi characters and it has tons of great queer presence and deals with death and just all these really tough things. It is really beautiful and it is really well done. And the game sold ultra poorly because at the end of the day, no one wants to buy a game where they know they're going to be miserable or they know it's going to be lectury or preachy. And I think a lot of it comes back down to the idea that educational games that have points, generally they at least in the past they were very bad. If games that taught you things were cool, we'd be playing Mario is Missing and stuff like that. But the thing is that at the end of the day, we are playing games and gameplay has to be the paramount thing. It doesn't matter what they're teaching you. It doesn't matter if it wouldn't matter if this is the most social justice-minded thing ever and it had all these great ideals and it's finally talking about this and that. If the gameplay isn't there, no one's going to care. And that's why there's so many, I think over the last couple of years, you're seeing games like Dysphoria by Ananthropy or even games like Papers, Please or things like that that deal with tough issues or deal with things that you might not ever, like if someone were to say, I want to make a game that deals with abuse of power and this and that, it's like, okay. But when when you see it in action, Papers, Please, it's a fun game, there's a challenge, it's, and you learn through the play mechanics the messages that the player, that Lucas Pope wants you to get out of it. He doesn't go and say, abuse of power is wrong, or here are the tough decisions that might happen. You have to live it through the gameplay. And I think that that's, a way that people renowned, things like Cart Life or Papers, Please, or even games like Gone Home as being these, good games because the gameplay is good. And that's, I think, what brings people in. I think if you just have, these cool ideas or you want to touch on these subjects and there's not, gameplay that can back it up. And it also can't be shoehorned in. You can't have, like, an amazing, AAA game and then just randomly you pop in. I'm thinking back to, like, NES games like Bible Adventures and stuff where you had this game, not that those were good games, but you had, like, just gameplay and at the end of each level would be, like, Bible trivia. And I'm like, well, if you really wanted to build in these like Bible facts or whatever, you have to build it into the gameplay. It has to be showing and not telling. You can't just be like tell people on the side if it has nothing to do with the gameplay. When you play things like Dysphoria and you're playing these little WarioWare micro games and the Tetris piece won't fit and you're frustrated because you're like, oh, and then you're like, oh, I kind of get it, sort of. I mean, like, it's obviously like kind of glib to break down transitioning to just that one little 3-second mini game, but at least through the gameplay, you're like, oh, I could kind of see how that would be frustrating. And theoretically, hopefully, you have a little bit more empathy for what the person's going through. So, like I said, we made this game called Read Only Memories that, features a robot named Turing who has, there's a whole conversation later on in the game about their gender identity. We ask people what their preferred pronoun is at the beginning of the game. We have a lesbian cop. We have 2 young queer kids. We have, like this weird, like, bottom bounty hunter. It's like it's super duper gay. But the game is very, very popular among people who would never, who hate SJW games. This game is very popular, like 4chan, and all these different, I'm really, try to be aware of it. And a lot of times those people are like, well, I just try to ignore the social stuff or whatever, but the thing is that they can't unlearn it. They can't unsee it. When they see it, you can't be hopefully with our game, we're normalizing all these things where, once you've interacted with a trans character or whatever, you can't be like, you've done it, you've interacted with that character. I think back to Samus Aran, where you play through Metroid, and at the end of the game, you find out that Samus is a woman, and if that bothers you, well, it's too late. You already played through the game and enjoyed it, and it's kind of like we got you. And in a way that's beautiful, right? Because the thing is that if someone were to say, in the 80s, here's this kick-ass, bounty hunter woman, that might not get through marketing. I mean, not marketing. They might not get greenlit, or players might not. It might not do successful because players are like, I don't want to play as a girl or whatever. Which is silly, but that's how the consumer market might have thought. But by doing it that way, people have to bond with the character. They love it. They end up developing this relationship, and then by the end of it, once you find out that she's a woman, hopefully, and I think for most people, they've already built a bond with the character that they're just like, cool, great, awesome, and that's why, to me, I think it would. My ultimate goal is to have a Call of Duty game or something like that, where you go through this game and it's super kind of heteronormative, and at the end of the game, the main character comes home to his boyfriend or something, and I just want to see people just freak out about that, right? Because the thing is, again, you can't do anything about it at that point. You've already been like, oh, this guy's cool, and now you're like, oh, and then it kind of messes with people's preconceptions of what someone who's gay or trans or whatever it is. So we made this game, and it's super queer, but it's subversive. It takes place, it uses a very Japanese style. The art is really cool. The music is super rad. It's a cyberpunk story, which is traditionally kind of conservative and a bit more kind of just old school. And there's some cyberpunk tropes that are a little bit more mainstream and Blade Runner-y and stuff. And so it brings in an audience that would normally, if we told people it's just a super gay, queer game, I don't know if a lot of these people who play it and buy it would necessarily play and buy it. So I run GamerX, and we have an event called GamerX Australia. So I went down, and we had our first year, and one of the other bosses of honor that was there, he made a game called My Ex-Boyfriend, the Space Tyrant. And if you take a look at it, there's a lot of things going on that one screen. There's a knocked out, half-naked Satan with a plunger on his butt, and just half-naked male dude over there, and just the whole thing is very clearly super ultra queer, right? And and to me, I kind of looked at it, at least prior to going down there, and I was kind of like, that's kind of okay, sure, right? I almost didn't take it that seriously. Where it's it's fun, but that's very clearly you're just kind of doing your thing, right? But when I talked to him, and I was kind of just oh yeah, I make this game, he basically was berating me and was your game is kind of a sellout game. I'm making a true this is my real vision. This is I don't care what the market is. I don't care about trying to subvert things. I'm just making my vision, and this is my reality. And if you if you're painting a picture and you got to use a little bit of black or white to kind of dilute it a little bit, all you're doing is just diluting the vision, and you're not giving people the real thing. And that really stuck with me, because I was you're right. I mean, I did, and I intentionally tried to make it something that could appeal to the mainstream straight audience. And he was no, I'm just gonna make my vision and my truth. And he's I believe that a lot of the audience, even straight people, whatever, will look at this, and they're open-minded enough to be cool, I want to see what that's like. And I was yeah. And the thing is that you also kind of need people if Hillary Clinton is basically this like theoretical, like, let's say that Hillary Clinton is a good person, but let's say that, right? But let's say that that she truly wants things to be good, and she does bad things because to get to the place where she's at. But then you see someone like a Bernie Sanders who is just like living that truth, and you see that and you're like, wow, like he really doesn't like take money from the special interests and stuff, and like maybe that's cool. But at the same time, you also, at the back of your mind, you're like, is that naive? Is that like converting? Like, a lot of people thought in the back of their mind, like almost everybody that I know was on the Bernie Sanders train. But I think a lot of us also question, like, is this someone who really knows how to play the political system to get things done? He says he wants to do all these things, these grand ideas, but would he just be a lame duck president, where he would get in and he would not be able to navigate the political waters of of America to make these changes? And in a way, well, this actually, I think like I backed myself into a corner. In a way, our game is sort of that, doing that work where I know that we have the hope of trying to make things better for the queer audience, and trying to show people like, oh, you can have these queer characters and it's normalized, and people, you can have these games that feature these characters and it can be successful. But again, could I be pushing things harder? Am I taking the safe route? And as the Gamer X guy and someone who's had a lot of opportunities that a lot of other developers that are queer or women or people of color would kill to have, I have this one opportunity to do this, and I'm taking the safe route at points, and it's like, well, is that, am I doing a disservice? But then there's the other side of it where it goes, we do live in a capitalist society. If we want to make more games, we need to make money, and we need to, be able to build an audience. And if we just make these, ultra gay games that might only hit that niche audience, and then we're out, we do one game and we're done because we can now make our money back. And these are things that, again, like there's no answer here. It all kind of depends on individual situations. But then you can, like, a game that came out 2 weeks before Read Only Memories, that's a great example of someone who was able to do it their way and do it successfully, is Undertale. Undertale is an extremely queer game that one of the battles actually has you convince one of the guards that he should confess his love to the other guard, and then like the dragon and bunny dude end up like dating, and by the end of the game they're like getting ice cream together, and it's like super cute and gay and stuff. But the thing is, Undertale sold like 1.5 million copies with no marketing and has tons of queer stuff, tons of queer stuff. And again, it was like one of those things where as I was playing it, like it was right before I released, I was like, man, maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe this is the right way. Because not only were they able to really, I don't know what was in his mind, but he certainly put it out there, and he was still able to be successful. So going back to the idea of subversiveness, if you look at the main characters of AAA games, very rarely do you see people who are not white men. You have a game like Mafia 3, which recently came out, that stars a black protagonist, and the game is doing, relatively well. And what's exciting and interesting about that is that the audience of people who might be Trump supporters or people who might, be racist, are still interested in playing games like this because it has an interesting, gameplay mechanics and cool, storylines and cool shooting methods and stuff like that. So they're willing to go, even if they think, oh, this is just some social justice, agenda to get me, to put more black characters in my games. They're still willing to play it, right? And then hopefully, again, it normalizes to them where they get attached to this character and they end up caring about this character. And then again, like in their mind, and as wrong or right as this whatever sounds, they go, oh, well, I guess black people aren't that bad, or I guess gay people aren't that bad, or whatever. Like, even if I still have these preconceptions, at least I've interacted with something that kind of breaks the initial, a lot of racism and intolerance comes from ignorance, right? And if you can break that first barrier where people have to go, maybe I should re-examine things, it kind of leads, hopefully, to a continued re-examining of how they view society. Dragon Age is another fascinating series. David Gator, who is lead writer of the series, has been in all these Gamer X's. I was asking him at the Games for Change festival, this is right after the newest one, Inquisition, came out. I was like, how did EA react to when you added the player sexual characters in 2, and then in 3 they actually kind of really became gay and bi and even asexual, and by the end of it, you have trans characters, and you have Iron Bull, who's clearly just like this fuck toy in a game, and the thing is that he'd be like, yeah, EA would always push back on all these different things, but they would see the reviews, and the reviews from 2 to 3 to Inquisition went up and up and up, and the sales went up and up and up, and they're like, okay, well, keep doing what you're doing. And so I feel like Dragon Age is a great example of a game that kind of worked within the system to say, we want to do things our way, and we want to do these fun things, but they did it within this kind of medievally, not medieval, but this kind of traditionally conservative style of game, and they managed to kind of inject their queerness into this genre that, again, exposes people who might not never be open to these kind of things to that, and it normalizes it. People who play Skyrim, you can marry, within your own gender and stuff. And again, these are people who, if Skyrim didn't allow that, a lot of people, they just kind of assume, if you're not queer and you don't directly know someone who's queer, or you don't directly know someone who's black or this or that, you just kind of go with what media tells you. And then so for the media to kind of be like, oh yeah, it's cool, everything's normal, then most young gamers will come up being like, that's normal. And hopefully, I think that's the goal of the people who are creating the series. But kind of it's like, I've realized I've kind of been all over the place. And the reason why is that there is no formula to this. If you have a specific vision that you want to get across, if you want to, let's say you really want to make a game about Norway, right? And you have this, you just have this really interesting, there's this Norwegian story or legend that you think is just super fucking rad. If you could get into a game, you just know that people would get it, and it would be super cool, and you want to just see that story go out to the world. Cool. But you got to figure out what's truly important to you, because at the end of the day, you have to also work within the system. If you want to get that message out to the world, you kind of have to pick your battles. If you have a very kind of abstract idea, or something that, like I said, making this kind of queer adventure game, by pairing it with a kind of conservative kind of shell, it allows for the game to kind of have a niche and be able to be classified, so that way we can kind of get those other things in. The biggest things to know is that money is going to come and go, and you got to do things that you're proud of and you're happy with the work that you're doing. So again, like I said, to go back to kind of what I was trying to say, if you have this idea in your head and you want to get it across, you got to figure out what elements are the things that you feel absolutely I'm not willing to compromise on. This is what makes this important. This is what is just this has to be in it for me to feel like I did this vision justice. But then if there's other parts that you're yeah, I don't care. It could be third-person shooter. Or I don't really care, right? I just know I want to get this one vision across. Cool. Now you know what you absolutely want and what you absolutely don't care about. And then you can kind of figure out what would be the best platform or the best way to get your message across in a way that's going to be able to go to market. If you like I said, you have to eat, and you have to be able to be classified to be in the system. If you want to make this super duper weird, game, a WarioWare type game where there's very little sales data, and you want to put it on these different platforms that probably have never had any historical hits on it, you're taking a huge risk, especially if you're already doing something super weird. You have to kind of figure out how to make the system work for you, where you can kind of subvert that system. If you know that right now, blank genre is really hot right now, and it's something that your studio can do, and you're yeah, let's hop on the AR train, right? But we also want to get these other things that these are our company values, and we want to work these into our game. Figuring out that balance of what's important to you and making sure you stay fast to it, but then also being able to be agile and willing to, iterate and be like, okay, like what is going to be the way that's going to get us through the door? How do we make something that's going to make money? If you have a vision or you have certain like ideas that you really want to get across, what things can you do that are a bit more normalized in terms of you have to create a bridge. Like imagine the game industry is this here, and you want to see the game industry get here. You want to see, let's say you want to see more women in games. You can't literally, if you make a game that's like literally it stars just a full female cast. That's awesome, that's rad, and hopefully it would do well, but that would be, you're basically stepping into uncharted territory. There's a reason why you look at like blockbuster movies, they always cast the same leads. It's always a white man, usually between like 20 and 40 of European descent, because they have sales data and they know that it works. And it's only over the last 10, 15 years or whatever that companies have sales data to go, oh, we can do an all-female Ghostbusters or this or that, and the audience is there for it. So if you want to, like I said, like if you want to see more women, in like as main characters in the industry, and you want to do that in your game, you might not be able to go full force right away. I've found that by doing it this way, where at least with our game with Read-Only Memories, if we create this really interesting exterior that appeals to retro gamers, a really interesting story that appeals to cyberpunkers and novelists, really cool soundtrack that appeals to audiophiles, then that's what they look at first, and then they go, oh, cool, there's a gay thing to it. Okay, that's cool, like, right? But like again, they can't unlearn it. They can't, like, even if they are against that, or even if it's like if let's say I'm a 13-year-old boy and I don't want to play as female characters, but damn, that new Tomb Raider game looks hot. I'm like, okay, sure, like I'll play that. And then again, like then you're like, okay, well I guess maybe I'm wrong about that. And that's sort of what inspires me is hopefully I want to see more games that, so going back to the whole topic of it, which is pragmatic and subversive versus full immersion. My tactics with GamerX and with Read-Only Memories and all the things that we do is pragmatic and subversive, where I'm not necessarily giving people my full, like, untamed truth, because I don't know if that would sell, and I don't know if I could make a business out of it. But I do feel like I've picked out the things I feel like I'm super passionate about, and things that I feel like, man, this is what I need to do to feel fulfilled in what I'm doing, to feel like I had this, because I have this opportunity, I don't want to feel like I've wasted it, and I feel like, I'm doing my true thing. But at the same time, at the back of my mind, I'm like, could I go deeper? Could I push more boundaries and make people feel more uncomfortable? And that's really up to you. To go back to that whole idea of, Kira with his game about growing up black in America, he knows, like, he's trying to find that balance right now. You don't want to, the average consumer, if you're thinking about it from just what the consumer is going to buy, they're not going to go to the store and be like, that looks like a fun, experience, right? You kind of have to wrap it into like things like Mafia 3, which are reaching millions of potential customers and are dealing with racism, talking about systemic racism, things like that, but do so in this kind of shell of fun, shoot 'em up, like Grand Theft Auto, whatever. That might be reaching more people and explaining racism than a game that only 100 people buy, because although it really gives the true truth, it's not really something that is a marketable product. And it really matters what your goals are. I mean, in America, we have no safety nets, and if we don't make money, you die, and if you get sick, you die. And so we have to kind of hedge our bets. But I would love to live in a world where, we could kind of go a little bit more risky and just kind of be like, here's our art, and this is just our truth. And I think for you, you need to decide where you want to be. Like if you want to try to get into the industry, if you're trying to, work towards getting in a AAA studio, or you're trying to put out something that can be successful so you can start your studio, or if you're trying to make art and just trying to tell your truth, and it doesn't matter if it's 100 people or 10,000 people, but you just kind of have to weigh everything together in terms of like, think about what to go back to the IGDA talk earlier today, like what do you want to do after this project that you're working on? If you're working on a game right now and it's finishing up in 6 months or a year or so, I mean, even if you're just starting pre-production on a game, you should think about what am I setting myself up for? If this game is a hit, what like for us with Read-Only Memories, we knew that we wanted to create a game studio, but we were starting off with very little capital, and we were like, okay, how do we create a game that appeals to a mainstream audience and can get on a bigger stage, and we do so with little budget, but with the hope that we can build a studio and build a sustainable studio out of it. For some people, they might just want to be, again, like they go, I want to make this one game, and it's been my dream since I was a kid, and it has to be perfect, and I don't care about the money side of it that much, and cool, and go full immersion. But yeah, again, like there is no actual answer in terms of like one way is right or one way is wrong. It really depends on what you care deeply about and what you're fighting for. Yeah, I mean, it really kind of depends on what is your goal and what kind of game industry you want to see. And if you have a specific vision, I think that being subversive can help reach an audience outside of your own. I believe that this might not be the most apt analogy, but something I had to come to terms with as we started working on GamerX and Read-Only Memories is that no one really gives a shit about gay gamers. No one gives a shit about women gamers. They don't give a shit about people gay with other gamers. They don't give a shit about the Nordic game scene. They don't care about it. You got to make them care about it. You got to convince them that this is something that is important, that is going to make the game industry better, that your presence is, and you have to like really fight for it. But you also got to figure out how do you convince that. You can't just go out there and because I go to all these different events and people say, well, this is important or this is important, but that's sort of like the vinegar in a way. Like you have to convince people that this is what they want to do, and in a way that's it's not an easy tactic, but it allows you to, I think, truly, oh man, jet lag is the worst. Let's just go to questions. Or just talk about anything. I want to talk about, what's on y'all's mind? Oh no.
So we'll just get the mic out there and we'll get the questions going.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
As far as anyone knows, I'm just like this white, straight guy, and I don't really know too much about the LGBTQ community. If I wanted to make like a character in a game that's on the spectrum, where could I find resources, people to talk to, and things like that?
Yeah. Well, so we film all of our panels from GamerX and we put them up on YouTube for free, and I think those are pretty helpful. But with Read-Only Memories, our team was only about 7 or 8 people, and we had in the game trans people and non-binary and this and that and things that we didn't have on our team. And what we basically did is we created basically like a diversity QA team where we had like our regular QA team that's just playing for bugs and stuff, but the diversity QA team where we purposely like found 8 or 9 people that were of like women, people of color, things like that, and we were like, here are certain scenes where we put in characters that we maybe we're not 100% sure. Like there's some characters that I was pulling from my life experience, but for other characters that were not from me or the writer's race or gender or anything like that. By going to these emotional QA people, and again, just like here's $250, play through the game, give us your notes on it. Do you feel like when there's scenes that you see yourself in, do you feel like it's appropriate? Do you feel like there's anything there that's extremely offensive or incorrect? Is there anything that doesn't line up with your experiences? And that was super helpful because you know, for one, you're employing and you're giving money to queer, you know, people and helping them get in the industry, which is just rad. But also, you know, you now have the confidence to know that what you're doing is right or wrong. That way, you know, and also, I mean, to be pragmatic, it also gives you a defense buffer. If someone goes, oh, you included a queer thing, that's not, you know, I find that offensive or whatever, and go, well, we actually consulted with queer people, you know, of those identities, and those were those real stories. And then you basically have an out. But I think it's just a really good way of, like, you know, if you work with people who are outside of your, you know, you shouldn't feel guilty for being a straight white man. But you should understand that you have a very specific perspective on the world that is only equivalent of, you know, 25 or 30% of the world, and you need to have, if you don't have people who are from diverse backgrounds on your team, if you can reach out to people, and you have the internet, so if you know, like I said, if you want to include a gay person in your game, you don't know any gay people, you know, go to NeoGAF or be like, hey, I'm writing an LGBT character in my game, and I'm looking to, you know, bring 2 or 3 people on, and I can give them like $25 and a line in the credit and a couple free Steam keys, and I just want to just play through it and see if, like, this script makes sense, or if there's anything here that doesn't seem, you know, right or wrong, and you know, get a couple different points of feedback. If one person is you know, some people might go too easy on you, some people might go too hard. You kind of have to decide what is within reason. But I think at the end of it, like, it helped us by doing that to, you know, with like some of our trans characters, things like that we didn't have direct access to on the team. It allowed us to know, okay, good, we're on the right track, or okay, like that's maybe we need to tweak that a little bit.
All right, so in situations like this with presentations and in the life of a gay person, all of these things are centralized, the focal points which you kind of centralize in games where the lead character, for example, is a gay person. But in the largest spectre, in the largest scene, where these things has the most success, we do see that they're not centralized, they're just a natural part of everything. Wouldn't that kind of be one of the very clear scenarios where you see that just adding something in the most natural way without any focal point is one of the most successful ways, and is also kind of the situation that everybody wants for, where it's so naturally added, so naturally included that nobody even thinks about it. It's just there, and it's a happy little addition.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, like, it's tough because the problem is systemic, where it's not like the people who are, there's people who are the obvious racist or obvious people who are prejudiced because they say bad things, or they like directly say, I think that women are not as whatever as men. But most people are not like that. Most people have systemic, very kind of subtle things in their mind in terms of, like, you know, even if you're the most open-minded person, you grew up in a society where everything is built around the patriarchy, and to unravel some of those things, we need to kind of give special attention to groups and things that haven't had the chance to thrive or the same opportunities that kind of the top of the chain has had. And it's tough to, like, kind of, you know, find out what that balance is, because, you know, ideally, you know, what you're saying is true, is where we want to live in an ideal society where everything is equal and everybody is treated fairly, and it's all just like, you know, like everyone has the same opportunities. But the thing is that we know that the data doesn't show that, and it can be tough, especially if you're creating a game where if you go, okay, my vision is this, and I don't want to just shoehorn in X character or Y character because those aren't my experiences. But it's tough because, again, if you are, you know, like a white straight male, you are a part of what is currently the dominating, you know, kind of sector. And so if you want to actually, you know, if we as a community want to see those changes, although it might not always be the most painless process, to do that work now will set the stage for 5, 10, 15 years from now, where when developers are creating games, they can go, look at all these wide variety of queer characters or women characters or black characters that have been in games, so that way things don't have to be shoehorned in, because now it's all just very, you know, like, it's all just very kind of normalized and natural. And I think that right now we have the responsibility to kind of like plant the seeds, so that way the next group that comes after us can live in a truly like egalitarian society, where we kind of have to go out of our way to kind of right the ship like a little bit, in terms of like raise up people who have kind of been at the bottom to kind of at least somewhere in parity. And yeah, but it's tough, because I mean at the same time, I mean, like, if you're a creator, you also have specific kind of ideas and things for your game, and you're trying to stay true to your vision. It's tough. It really depends on what you know. Like, at the end of the day, you got to do what's right for you. If you feel like this story is the way it needs to be, and I feel like if I had to make these changes, it would ruin the story or whatever. Like, cool. I mean, it's your art. You got to do you, but you also got to realize that in a way you are contributing to the systemic problem, even if your intentions are pure.
Hi.
Hello.
Talking about subversiveness, recently with the recent DSX game, they clearly wanted to talk about racism, right? And then they seem to have gone a bit too far in the subversiveness, that they've like pushed it into a metaphor. Is that something you think about when you're trying to be like subversive and you're trying to be kind of sneaky and get these issues in, that if you go too far, the entire message just disappears?
Well, I mean, yes, because that's something I always think about in terms of like, yeah, I mean, if you go too far, then you're basically the enemy. And it's like, you know, and where's that line? And it's almost like, let's say that you're a cop, and you know, sometimes you kind of have to get your hands dirty to really make the change. But if you become too dirty, then like, what separates you from being a criminal? So I think about that. I don't think that that's the case with Deus Ex. I think with Deus Ex, it was a case of white people writing a story and wanting to write about racism without truly understanding it. And they write this kind of very overly simplified thing where, you know, it's the you know, like, they don't actually, it felt like you know, with the marketing where they're like, Augs Lives Matter, and then when people were like, hey, you know, this is actually kind of offensive, they kind of, you know, based on their reaction where they're like, no, and they were like fighting with people, it's very clear that they didn't have anyone who really understood that message when they were doing the marketing campaign, and they were just kind of trying to have it both ways, where they can kind of be like, we're a political game, but then you go play the game and there's no real political message. It's actually very kind of like Adam Jensen is just kind of like Robo Boy. And it, you know, and I think that the contrast between that and Mafia 3 is astounding, because I think that the Mafia 3 gameplay is kind of but the story and the characters are so well researched. Like, when you're walking around town, there's a bunch of white dudes who are complaining about how they replaced one of the characters on Star Trek with a black woman, and how they couldn't take that seriously. And it's like, you know, like, and this is like, again, like, these people who, they're not saying the N words, they're not like outwardly being racist, but they are still, you know, it's very kind of subtle microaggressions. And it's just kind of interesting that they did that research. And I feel like Deus Ex, they want to be like, oh yeah, we're talking about, you know, racism and stuff because it's a hot button topic by our game. But then they never really make any strong opinions one way or the other. You know, like, it just feels very like, I don't think that was ever in their intent to like actually say anything about it. I think they just kind of want to be like, how do we be relevant? So I don't know. I was disappointed in Deus Ex. I'm a huge Cyberpunk fan. I just felt like it was like, so it missed out. Like, I don't know. I played that game, the previous game, and I don't remember anything about any of the characters. And the conversations go on for like 30 minutes, and I'm just like, you're just talking. I don't know. You're not saying anything. So yeah, it feels like a game that's written by all men. And that's something that also really helped me with Revealing Memories, is our original writer was a dude. I mean, the lead writer was a dude, and he wrote a very conservative script, and basically had a bunch of women and men who came and did the second draft and kind of worked off of it. And although his stuff was very intellectual and had a lot of really interesting stuff that we used, it was very, very dry and was very clearly, especially when it came to the women characters, it's very clear that this guy did not know women or necessarily even like women that much. And so by having women and people who were, actually can write women on the team, we were able to make these characters a lot more, and I think that that's something that they probably should have done with Deus Ex, is I think if they ran it by, even just queer, I mean, like, I don't know, it just struck me as just kind of like a very, like, white dude thing, which again is not necessarily a bad thing, but a lack of diversity of opinions and feedback creates, I think, a less interesting story. Who else? Yeah. Hello. What's up?
I'm sure you've had to deal with, you've seen the phenomenon, at least in media, where if somebody approaches a creator and tells them, like, I personally, as a gay person or as a black person, find your work concerning in some way, it goes two ways. They either ignore you or they double down and tell you that you're trying to censor them. Do you have any experiences in sort of like approaching creators with feedback or criticisms in a way that makes them listen to you instead of blocking you on Twitter? Yeah,
I mean, it's tough because I think that like Twitter doesn't provide a nuanced platform for discussion, and I mean, it's not just Americans, but I think especially in America, we live in a binary system. And if you tell someone that like, oh, well, this character that you wrote, like I love your game, it's great, this character you wrote is kind of homophobic. You're basically telling them you're homophobic and you're a bad person. And they don't want to hear that. No one wants to hear that they're a bad person. And it's tough because it's hard to give people, because even for us, like, every once in a while we get people who are like, oh, well, this character is transphobic, or why didn't you include, there's not really any Arab characters in our game, like, why didn't you do that? And at times I'm like, your first reaction is always like, because it's hard to tell intent, I think, with Twitter. And that's the toughest part, is that you don't know if these people are just complaining because they just want to complain, or if they're actually like, oh, I want to help you out, and I love your work so much that I'm willing to go out of my way to give you my personal feedback, like feedback that you really actually should be paying for, but I'm giving it to you for free because I want you to be better. But I think it's really hard. People don't know how, especially if someone's really busy or they're famous, whatever. It also kind of tries back to society, like to psychology in terms of like, if you have all these positive people who are saying you're great, and you have this person who's like, your thing is homophobic. Generally, people are not disciplined enough to be like, I think I'm going to rationally take that in and be like, okay, that's interesting. You're just going to be like, no, fuck this person. I mean, that's why you look at like people like Notch, where like as soon as Notch gets his money and his power, all of a sudden he becomes like white nationalist, like racist piece of garbage. And but that's the thing is that, like, it's tough because I think that I don't know, that's just how we have Trump, is that like Twitter and social media creates this weird echo chamber where it's really hard. So I think that, like, honestly, I would just it's not that easy, especially living here in Norway, but talking to people face to face is so much better because you have to actually like talk to people and understand things, and there isn't that cognitive dissonance of like, you're not a real person because you're on the internet and you're just like some whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that like writing an email where you just kind of like, it's 140 characters is too short, and you're basically calling someone out publicly, and no one likes that. I think if you write an email where you're like, hey, I'm a huge fan, and I write this with the utmost of love, and here's my experiences with this, and I actually feel like you could have done, try to be solution oriented. Try to be like, don't just say, well, you did a bad job. Okay, okay. But if you go, well, I think that for your future games, maybe you should potentially try to talk to some more queer people, or if you're going to talk about this one specific issue, keep in mind that blank is not always blank, and that would really help you. And yeah, I mean, also keep in mind that like artists and people who create games are generally divas, and so you do have to kind of like put on the kid gloves a little bit. But yeah, okay. One more question. Captain America? Oh wait, we have one back here, right? Yeah, right? Yeah.
So this is more of a development-based question, but most of the people around me are kind of apathetic to kind of these political causes, I guess. Like, to use your analogy, it's like I'm more like Bernie Sanders, I guess.
Yeah.
So if you want to make these kind of games, do you have, like, what advice would you give to someone that wants to push a message and not just continue to kind of not really talk about it, whereas everyone around you just kind of passes you off as kind of the group SJW or whatever, and doesn't really want to collaborate with you at all? Like, how do you work with that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is finding, you know, your contemporaries. You know, it can be isolating with, like, you know, because we are like the gay game studio, we both get the advantages and disadvantages of that. You know, a lot of times, like, Intel will be like, we're going to sponsor your thing or whatever, and that's great. We get these kind of advantages, and sometimes we get a lot of, like, you know, nice liberal people who are like, oh, that's so cool that you're doing gay stuff. But by that same token, a lot of people kind of write us off and go, oh, well, it's just the gay game, like, whatever. That's not a real video game. And it's tough because you have to, you do have to live in the reality of, like, if that is how people are pragmatically thinking, and if that's what that goes through their mind, you do have to kind of work within those you know, things. I think that the great thing about the world that we live in is we live in a flat society. You know, I was really inspired by this speech about, you know, let's all of Norway join together and be a presence together. But, you know, like with Read Only Memories and through our team, you know, we have one of our writers is in Switzerland, one of our writers is in Mexico. You know, we have team members all across the United States. You know, find people who truly understand your vision and believe that what you're doing is important, and don't work with people who are going to be like, kinda. I mean, like, you don't have time for that. You just find people who truly, you know, like, hopefully you're going to find people here, Norway or whatever, but don't just settle for the people who are around you. You know, if they're like, oh, I don't get it, and just be like, all right, well, I don't got time for you. And that's sort of like kind of my thought process in terms of, like, figure out, like, pick your battles. You can't be like there are people who whine and cry about everything, right? And those people don't get anything done because they're not solution oriented. Figure out the 2 or 3 things that you're like, these are the hills that I'm willing to die on, and everything else can be flexible and agile, and I'm willing to kind of do whatever. But yeah, I mean, if there's something that you really are like, I feel, let's say that you really care about the environment, and you believe that global warming is going to kill us all in 50 years. How do we really get that message across in a fun way? And if that's something that you care about, be like, that's the thing I'm not going to compromise on, and everything else is open for negotiation. Not necessarily, and I know I'm out of time, but not necessarily the same thing, but with Read Only Memories, we're porting it to Japan, and as we were showing Japanese companies, they were like, oh, this game is great, the art is great, but we probably kind of have to, like, change some of the gay stuff, or we don't want to market that because that's not going to sell, right? And we're the gay company. Like, I was like, that is not up for negotiation. There's 10 other things I'd be willing to be like, okay, we could change this or that, but if that's the deal, then I'm walking away from that. And the fact that you even asked that means that it's not a good fit. So yeah, but there's other times when people go, I don't know if you guys be open to this, or this is very last minute. I'm like, I don't care, cool, great. But if it's something that goes against our, like, core values, and that's what core values when you start up a company is so important. Figure out those 3 or 4 things that you're like, this is who we are, and at the end of the day, if I were to die tomorrow, and like, I'm the CEO, if I were to die tomorrow, I know that all my soldiers understand and believe these same values, and I know that they would carry this company forward in that same thing. I think in the same way, figure out what you really care about and what you really are not willing to compromise and bend on, and everything else just kind of be willing to be flexible and agile. So thank you, everybody, and I'll be around all week and stuff, and tweet at me and stuff. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt.